Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show. Today's episode is going to be hosted by our good friend Bishop E.W. Jackson. Bishop Jackson is an American hero, a United States Marine Corps veteran, Harvard-educated minister of the gospel whose love for this country, his wisdom, and his passion resonate deeply. He's going to be leading today's program from our remote location in Chesapeake, Virginia. So here we go. Here's today's show with Bishop E.W. Jackson.
Welcome to Truth and Liberty. I'm your host, Bishop E.W. Jackson. I'm sitting in for Richard Harris today. Great to be with you. Thank God for you, because we do this as service to God and to you. And we're so glad that you are watching and taking it all in and praying for us and supporting us. Thank you so very much. Truth and Liberty is a very, very important contribution to the public discussion, and one that is all too often not had, because the biblical worldview perspective is simply not expressed enough, sadly, not even that much on what's called Christian programming. So we are so happy to be able to bring you this information from a biblical perspective. Thank you for the opportunity to do so. Please continue to pray for us, because we do solicit your prayers, your support in every way, contributions, however you can help us. Let God use you to do that. And we want to be a blessing to you. And so today, for example, we've got a free offering we want to give to you. It's a book written by Richard Harris, or booklet. It's called The Calling to Manhood. The Calling to Manhood. Very relevant, because we're going to be talking about this issue today. The Calling to Manhood. In order to get the book, go to truthandlibertygtn.com. Truth and Liberty, that's all spelled out. Truth, A-N-D, Liberty, G-T-N.com to get your free product today. We'll be happy to get that sent to you. Also want to remind you, by the way, that on May the 16th, coming up here, not too many days, and this is particularly important if you live in the Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, or anywhere in the vicinity, we're holding our Stand Awards dinner on Friday, May the 16th at 7 p.m. at Cornerstone Chapel in Leesburg, Virginia. And that's very, very easy to get to, particularly if you're in the area. It's a great church and a great venue for this particular event. Stand, of course, is my organization. I'm the founder and president and CEO. STAND is an acronym for Staying True to America's National Destiny. I believe that God had a destiny in mind when he put this nation in the hearts of our founding fathers. And we are still on a quest to fulfill it. And we're not going to allow the devil to short circuit us or stop us from fulfilling God's plan for this nation. You know, folks, America is unlike any other nation on earth in several ways. But here's one of the ways that people seldom think about. You know that America is the only nation on earth that has absolutely no indigenous people. Now, you may be shocked to hear that. You may say, whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute. Native Americans are indigenous. No, they're not. They're not. They were here first, that's true, but they're not indigenous. Native Americans have Asian DNA. Native Americans, for the most part, came across the Bering Strait from Asia thousands of years ago, if you believe in the short earth theory, the biblical earth theory of age. Several thousand years ago, they came across the Bering Strait and settled in North America. In fact, some of them went on, of course, to South America. Some settled here in North America. And when the first Europeans arrived on this continent, certainly they find them here, but they're not indigenous to this continent. God picked a place that would be made up of people, all of whose ancestors come from somewhere else. You ever think about that? This is the only nation like that. You can't say that about Asia. You can't say that about Africa. You can't say that about other parts of the world, but you can say that particularly about North America, probably true for South America as well. But South America is not one nation. That's many different nations. This continent, North America, is essentially one nation. Well, Canada's to the north of us, but we obviously populate the vast majority of this continent, and we're obviously the most successful nation in the history of mankind. 4.25% of the population, and you've probably been hearing President Trump talk about it. We purchase about 36% of the world's goods because we're the most prosperous nation on earth, and we have the highest standard of living of any nation on earth, and therefore more people have more wealth to do whatever they want to do with it, to buy whatever they want to buy with it. That's not just true for billionaires and millionaires. That's true for most Americans. I mean, most Americans pretty much buy what they want. Now, of course, we don't necessarily have the money to go out and buy a yacht, unless you're a multimillionaire. But most Americans can buy the car they want. Most Americans live in the kind of house they want. Most Americans can go out and buy the groceries they want and really don't much give it a second thought. This is really a unique place where God brought together people from all over the world. Acts 17:26 says what? He has made from one blood every nation of men. One blood. See, ultimately, folks, there's only one race. Ultimately, from a biblical perspective, we all come from the same genetic origin. We all have ultimately the same parents. He has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth and determine their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, that they might seek the Lord. Now I ask you, I know America's far from perfect. And by the way, have I shared the secret with you folks? Why America is not perfect? Are you ready? Now, you want to share this with only a select group of people because not everybody gets this. But the reason why America is not perfect, there are people here. And not a single one of us is perfect. Not one. You can, if you want to divide us up by demographic groups into what people call racial classifications, you can do that, and you won't find a single one from any group that you choose who is perfect. And you won't find a single group that is perfect. Perfect in virtue, perfect in character, perfect in morals. None of them. There is none righteous, no, not one. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. But the nation that has been the most prolific promoter of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the truth of God's word is the United States of America, and no other nation even comes close. Now, you can slice that and dice that any way you want, but don't you think God is pleased with that? Don't you think that's what God wanted? Don't you think that's what God had in mind when he put in the hearts of our founding fathers the creation of the United States of America? And I know, folks, I believe me, I know. Yeah, but Bishop Jackson, America had slavery. I have to admit, I do get a little frustrated with this because, folks, every nation, every tribe, every group that's ever existed on the face of the earth has had slavery. All of them. It is a universal evil that mankind has perpetrated against each other. It didn't start with the African slave trade. In fact, long before Europeans arrived in Africa, North African Muslims were already trading in sub-Saharan Africans, dark-skinned Africans, already had a name for them because they considered them to be good slaves, already had a name for them, Abid, which both meant African and slave. The Europeans get there, and since slavery has already existed all over Europe and all over the world, and then they find out, well, there's a slave trade here, and they introduce them to it, and they say, oh, we can make money. We can make money on this one. I always jokingly say, people act like slavery was something that America invented. I say, didn't anybody see Spartacus? I mean, did anybody see Spartacus? The Romans sought to enslave the whole world. And by the way, the slavery wasn't based on race. Because again, if you want to use racial classifications, the Romans and the Spartans were of the same European background. Did they make a distinction? Because, oh yeah, but they look differently. No, they didn't look any differently. They didn't care how they looked. They cared that they weren't powerful enough to stop Rome from subjugating them, and they made them slaves. So if you want to compare America to heaven, oh yeah, whoa, you got to, let's start the list of complaints. But then you got to compare America to everywhere else and see how they bear up. Folks, there's not another nation on earth, not another nation on earth that established itself on principles that were incompatible with slavery, even though slavery was a universal institution at the time that America was birthed. But only one nation said, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those words echoed down through the ages and resonated in the heart of every American and pricked the conscience of the American people. And when Dr. King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and gave his I Have a Dream speech, he quoted those words. He didn't say those words were wrong. He said, it is time for America to live up to those words. Well, I tell you what, I'd rather live in a country that has words to live up to than a country that doesn't. Because when he spoke those words, they resonated in the heart of every American because every American could relate to them. Say, yeah, but America didn't live up to those words. Yeah, well, we're Christians. We have a Bible. Have you lived up to every bit of it? Because if you have, well, we ought to just make a little altar to you. because obviously you are way ahead of the rest of us. I hear Andrew say, and Andrew is a great man of God who I profoundly, deeply admire. But I hear Andrew say, I'm not saying I've done all this perfectly. I'm not saying I live up to this perfectly. Exactly, Andrew, because not a single person can say that they have. And no, our founding fathers didn't live up to the words that were uttered in the Declaration and written in the Declaration of Independence, but they were written, I believe, not simply by the hand of man, but came from the heart of God. And that's why those words continue to control the destiny of this nation. Have we completely lived up to them now? No, I don't believe so. I think we continue to strive. Because folks, an ideal is an ideal precisely for that reason. Because it is something to strive to be, to strive to become, to strive to live up to. And you try to get closer and closer and closer and closer to it. Doesn't mean that you ever arrive. But as Andrew also likes to say, but at least you've left. So, at least you have left. I find myself sometimes at moments when I am a little bit impatient, which is my inclination at times, quoting Galatians 5:22 and 23, love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I'm meditating on that because at that moment, I know I'm not necessarily showing love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, but I'm reminding myself that that is the standard to which I aspire. And I bring myself under subjection to that standard. Lord, help me, because I know that's the way as a Christian I'm supposed to conduct myself. Not impatient and short with people and angry with people and upset with people and saying mean things to people. I'm not supposed to behave that way. And I aspire to behave toward other human beings in a way that would demonstrate the love of God always. But I'd be lying to you if I said I think I 100% always live up to that standard. But I'm working on it. And I really believe that America is working on living up to the standards that were set for us by the founding fathers, even though we know they themselves didn't live up to it. This was not what I really planned to talk to you about at the length I have, but I really believe this is inspired by the Holy Spirit. I want to talk to you about another important matter when we come back from this break, and that is the family. And it's very much related to the things that I've been saying to you so far. I'm Bishop E.W. Jackson, your host here on Truth and Liberty. I'm sitting in for Richard Harris. I want to remind you, folks, we have a free offering for you. The Calling to Manhood by Richard Harris. All you have to do is go to truthandlibertygtn.com to get your free product today. Stand by for more of Truth and Liberty in just a moment.
I want to let you know that we are having a Truth and Liberty Awards banquet on May the 2nd, and I'd like to invite you to be a part of it. This is a fundraiser. We are charging. We give out a great meal, and we're going to have Seth Gruber to be our keynote speaker. We're going to honor Abby Johnson, the one who the movie Unplanned was made about, and also Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, and it's just going to be a great time. If you can't come, we would encourage you to give and to support it. Remember, it's the 2nd of May, our Truth and Liberty Awards banquet, and I'd encourage you to be a part of it. You'll be blessed.
We're back. I'm your host, Bishop E.W. Jackson, sitting in for Richard Harris here on Truth and Liberty. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to remind you, folks, that on May the 16th, we've got a major event coming up. Stand does, that is called our Stand Awards Dinner. We're giving the George Washington Award for taking a stand to 5 great patriots. That's going to happen on Friday, May 16th at Cornerstone Chapel in Leesburg, Virginia. Andrew Wommack Ministries is a major sponsor of this event, and we are so grateful to you, to Andrew, to the whole staff and support system of Charis and Andrew Wommack Ministries for supporting us. The mission of STAND is to bring Americans together across racial and cultural lines to uphold our Judeo-Christian values and heritage. We've been working at this for about 16 years, and God has truly blessed us. And we thank you so much for your prayers and support. If you'd like to know how to support that dinner and support the organization in general, go to standamerica.us. That's standamerica.us, and you can donate, or you can buy tickets, or you can sponsor in any way you can help. But in the meantime, please pray for us, because, prayer will always produce resources. Resources will never substitute for prayer. So thank you. I also want to remind you that we do have a free gift for you, courtesy of Richard Harris, who's written a book called The Calling to Manhood. The Calling to Manhood. And that free booklet, we'll send this to you as a free gift, is available at truthandlibertygtn.com. Truthandlibertygtn.com. Now, folks, I want to get into an issue that is not talked about enough, in my view. And let me back up for a second and say how we got here. In 2020, after the death of George Floyd, there was a big movement to defund the police. And it really took root in many cities across the country, and police budgets were slashed, and police personnel were cut. And because of the demoralization of police departments, many police officers retired, many quit. And of course, recruitment became a crisis, because there were very few people willing to join police departments, thinking, why should I join a police department and be vilified by all the people in the community, or by many of them, and also be in fear of losing my freedom if I make a mistake in judgment. Even if it's not intentional, I could lose my freedom, maybe even when these situations get volatile, lose my life. I don't need that. And so most police departments across the country faced a recruitment crisis and tremendous shortages. You all probably noticed it in your own communities. I know I did. I noticed fewer police officers around. Thank God I don't live in a high crime area or anything, but I notice the diminution, if you will, of police officers around. There was a terrible consequence of that. And the terrible consequence is something that we chronicle called America's Forgotten Children. At this point, folks, 650 children have been murdered in the inner cities of our country since that time. It immediately spiked up. The first one to be murdered after this sort of the George Floyd riots and all the upheaval was a 5-year-old kid named Legend Taliaferro, who was shot to death in his bed because some guys in that neighborhood decided they were going to shoot up the neighborhood, shot into his house and kill that 5-year-old kid. Just sleeping in his bed, literally sleeping in his bed, murdered before he could even wake up. And then another 649 plus followed, and we're still keeping count. In fact, we have a website called americasforgottenchildren.com. America's, no apostrophe after the S, after the A, that is americasforgottenchildren.com. You can go to that website and you can see the pictures and the stories about all those murdered children. Well, we've been talking about that for years and about the need to do something about that. And we focus on one, we do need to restore the presence of police officers in these neighborhoods so that they can be a deterrent to crime, because a lot of times crimes won't be committed when police are present because people don't want to be arrested. They don't want to be locked up. And that deters them from committing crime. But when they know the police aren't coming, or that it's going to take a long time for them to get there, they don't have the resources to investigate a crime, it emboldens criminals. And very often when these things happen, and we, for example, I went and did an event in Chicago and had one mother whose son was murdered while he was having his haircut, sitting in the barber's chair. Bullets came through the barber shop, shot the child dead. MJ. His mother's name, by the way, is Happy Greg. But that aside, child just murdered in cold blood. Talked to the police about this. They finally did find the people. It took them years to do so. They only solve 10% of these crimes. 10%. That means 90% of the people committing these murders are walking the streets of the city, unless they've gotten locked up for something else. They're walking the streets and will probably murder again, and in many cases have murdered more than once. Well, we talked about that, and we will continue to talk about that, but we also talked about the importance of restoring respect for police officers. And then we talked about the importance of educational opportunity, educational choice, so that kids have an opportunity to get an education that raises their vision and allows them to see that there's something better for them than drug dealing and street running and violence and association with a gang. Which brings me then to the third and most important issue, which I'm going to talk about for the rest of the program, and that is rebuilding the family. Here are some very sad statistics, folks, and most people won't say this either because they're afraid to, or because they just don't want to point it out because they feel maybe they'll be called racist. 52% of the murders committed in America are committed by 6% of the population. That 6% of the population happens to be Black men. Now, that's a sad statistic. I get no pleasure in sharing it. I think it's horrible. And it's not because I think that these young Black men are somehow inherently morally deficient. But when you have vast numbers of people, particularly young guys, who grow up in single-parent, female-headed households with a mother who's either trying her best, but when that kid becomes bigger than she is and starts coming under the influence of guys who can relate to him on a guy level that she can't do, and they start to have these influences of the streets and the rappers and the gangsters and the drug dealers and all the stuff that they claim they have and they can get, and the sense of family, the sense of belonging, the sense of their people who are looking out for you, all that starts to influence them. In all but a small number of cases, these kids succumb to that and end up repeating the same mistakes as those who've gone before them. And they end up either in jail or drug addicted or dead. And often on the way, end up killing somebody else. Now, by the way, 94% of their victims, I said they commit 52% of the murders that happen in America, 94% of their victims are Black. And many of them are innocent women and children. Even when they're setting out to get somebody who they consider to be a rival or an enemy, they often end up shooting somebody who has nothing to do with it and just happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so with that background in mind, we said, what are we going to do about the family? What are we going to do about trying to bring stability back to the family? And by the way, folks, let me just make something clear. I've focused on the inner cities and the Black community because that's where the problem is most acute. But the breakdown of the family is happening all across the board in America. In 1950, for all of those European immigrants, Irish, Italian, German, all the people who migrated to this country, their parents migrated to this country from Europe, only 3% of their children in 1950 were born out of wedlock. Only 3%. That number is now approaching 40%. 40%. In that same year, 1950, only 13% of Black children were born out of wedlock. 87% of Black children were living in two-parent, married, monogamous families. That number is now only about 28% are living in two-parent, monogamous families. 72% of children are born out of wedlock. 66% are raised in single-parent, female-headed households. Some percentage end up in a two-parent family when their mother maybe remarries, and so they have a family, maybe with a stepfather, that kind of thing. But wherever this is happening, folks, it has devastating consequences. And when you look at the data on who's in prison, and people often like to point out there are too many Black people in prison. I agree. I agree, absolutely. But guess who they are? They are, for the most part, men raised in single-parent, female-headed households. And that's across the board, too, whether they come from Hispanic or Caucasian or Black or whatever. That tends to be where they've come from. Dysfunctional families, sometimes with mothers who did their very best, and it just wasn't enough. And I know some of you guys watching me right now may be saying, you know what, my mother was a single mother, but she got the job done. God bless your mother, because look, there are women out there who are trying. But you know, it really does take a very special circumstance, maybe just even a miraculous grace from God, for a 5'2" woman to look at a 6'1" guy and tell him, "Oh, you will obey me," and have him say, "Yes, mother." Not when some other 6'1" guy out in the street is telling him, "You don't have to pay any attention to her. You're a grown man now. You can do what you want to do," even though he may be 15, 16 years old. I mean, folks, that's hard to overcome. And God bless the ones who overcome it. But I tell you what, it's not God's best. Look, the ideal circumstance for a child to be raised in, ideal, and I know this is not always possible. I understand that. So I'm not criticizing people who are on a second marriage and there's a stepfather in the home. Praise God that there's a two-parent family raising these children, because, you know, often children find in their stepfather, or for that matter, their stepmother, but usually their stepfather, a man that they know and love as their father, who's been nothing but good to them and a blessing to them. So please don't think that I am in any way criticizing that. I am not. But the data is in that the most ideal circumstance for a child to be raised in is to be raised by his or her biological mother and father, living together in the bonds of matrimony, not shacking up, if you'll forgive the colloquialism, not shacking up, but married with a covenant commitment to one another to live the rest of their lives together, to raise those children together, and to be one another's companion for a lifetime. That's the ideal circumstance for a child. And by the way, folks, that circumstance is fraught with the foibles and the sins and the shortcomings of those parents. Even that circumstance, we know is not perfect. I have been married for 54 years. In September, it'll be 55 years. My wife and I raised our children together. We were never separated. We've never talked about divorce. We don't have any other children anywhere else. And I'm not in any way bragging about that or condemning anybody else, but that's just the truth. We don't have any other children. I don't have any other children. She doesn't have any other children. We raised our children together. And even with that, we weren't perfect parents. But just think about that. Even in that circumstance, you got parents who aren't perfect. Guess where all the domestic violence, for the most part, takes place? Over 80% of domestic violence cases against children take place where a mother is with a man to whom she's not married, and those children are being raised by a man who is not their biological father. So the ideal circumstance, the ideal, is marriage for life. And I know human beings, being imperfect and sinful as we are, it's not always going to happen. But as I said earlier in the program, don't we have to have an ideal to which we strive? Don't we have to have something that we're trying to live up to rather than just, this is the way it is. And, nobody's perfect, and making all kinds of excuses and justifications for ourselves. My wife and I come from two very different circumstances. My wife was raised in a two-parent, monogamous, married home. My father-in-law and my mother-in-law were married all their lives. Their marriage didn't end until each of them went home to be with the Lord. I, on the other hand, was born into a broken home, never lived with my father and mother at all, as far as I can remember. That I never lived with actually, I take that back. For a week or two, under circumstances I won't even get into, my mother and father got back together, but it was with my father's intention of making sure that he got control of me, because he was concerned about what might happen to me otherwise, and rightly so. But other than that, 14 months old, foster care. Raised in foster care for 10 years. Taken out of foster care by my beloved father, who got a revelation that if he didn't do it, my foster mother couldn't control me even at the age of 10 years old, and my foster father couldn't control me because I knew he wasn't my father and I wasn't going to listen to him. Now, I'm just telling you like it was. And my biological father came and took over and set me on the straight and narrow path. The man before you today is before you today, in part because God used my father to get me out of a gang, to get me off the streets, and to get me in school, and to get me doing what I was supposed to do under his tutelage and his discipline, let me tell you. And I did not have an abusive father, but I'll tell you what, he knew how to get you straight. And I am so glad he did. But look, as a result of that experience, when I finally got married, nothing but the grace of God. I know it was, though I wasn't saved. But when I got married, I used to say to my wife, I am never going to do to my children what my mother and father did to me, which was to end up having me as a kid. And I remember it, folks, very distinctly. What's wrong with me that my mother and father don't love me? What's wrong with me that they don't have me with them? What's wrong with me that I can't be with my mother and father? And these were our heroes. I can remember thinking and talking to my friends, well, one of these days we may end up in jail, but I tell you what, when we come out, nobody's going to mess with us. You think, that's such dysfunctional thinking, but that's exactly the thinking we had. Until my father turned my thinking around. And if he had not stepped in at that moment, it might have been too late. And I think he knew that, and that's why he stepped in. In fact, I got a lot of data I want to share with you and some other things, but let me just tell you the story, folks, because it brings this home. I was standing on the corner one day. I still get emotional telling this story. I was standing on the corner with my gang, with the little aspiring thugs I was hanging around with, being me being one of them. And my father pulled up. I will never forget it. We were standing right in front of Madeline's supermarket. I can remember it like it was yesterday, and I'm 10 years old. And my father rolled down his window and pointed at me and summoned me. Because I knew who my father was. It's not like I didn't know I had a father and didn't know who he was, because he would visit my foster home, but he wasn't raising me. So I would see him when he visited. And he visited probably once, sometimes maybe twice a week. So I knew him. And from time to time, I knew he asserted himself in the situation too. And I won't get into those stories, but he summoned me and came over. He said, "Son, you always say you want to come live with me. You still want to come live with me?" And I remember saying, "Yeah, Dad, yeah, I want to come live with you." But I'm thinking to myself, one of these days it'll happen, maybe. And he said, "Get in." I got in. He took me down to my foster home. We were only about a block, 2 blocks away. He drove me there. We were there in a minute or 2 minutes. He got out of the car. I got out of the car. He walked in. Said to my foster mother, her name was Rebecca Mollett. I love that woman. She was the only mother I really knew. And he said to her, "Miss Beck," because he called her Miss Beck. Her name was Rebecca Mollett. In fact, we named our middle daughter after my foster mother. He said, "Miss Beck," he said, "I'm taking my son to live with me." And I remember the look on her face like it was a joke. Because remember, she'd had me since I was 14 months old. And kind of like puzzled and she said, "What are you talking about?" Kind of like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Miss Beck, I'm taking my son to live with me. I'm not." And he just made it clear to her that he was not joking. And at that point, she started to turn hysterical. Like, "You can't do that, and the courts won't let you do that. And you didn't da 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 da." And my father just very calmly, he didn't get angry with her. He didn't fuss with her. He just calmly said, "Miss Beck, if I don't take my son now, we're going to lose him to the streets." And that didn't deter her at all. She just continued to just cry and say, "You can't do that." And so finally, realizing my father was resolute, she said to him, "Well, let me pack his stuff. Let me give me a couple weeks to." And my father said, "No, I'll come back and get anything that you have for him, anything that he needs, but I'm taking him now." And with that, my father said, "Go get in the car, boy." I turned, went and got in his car, left her standing there crying, because I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. And my father put me in the car, drove me to his apartment, and never looked back. And folks, that was the moment my life changed, because my father stepped into my life to let me know that he loved me and that he had aspirations for me, and he was not going to allow the streets to swallow me up. And you know what? All that stuff I've been doing, whatever I wanted to do, whenever I wanted to do it, going where I was, 10 years old, coming and going as I pleased, and committing little petty crimes and lying about it and laughing when they tried to punish me. I mean, all that came to a grinding, screeching halt. My father said to me, "Son," he said, "you've been saying you want to come live with me." He said, "And now you live with me." He said, "And every day with me can be like a day of heaven on earth, or every day I will tear your behind all to pieces. It is up to you." Now, I know in this modern time, that may seem a little harsh to people, but I tell you what, in that day and time, it was exactly the medicine I needed. And my father proved to me that he was prepared to enforce what he said. He laid down some very clear rules for me, one of which was, you will go to school, you will study, you will do well in school, you will do your homework, and you will obey me. When I speak, you listen. He said, and when the time comes, if you mess up, you're going to be punished. And then he told me this because, see, I was famous for running. Folks, I was famous for running. My foster parents would say to me, because we didn't have an indoor bathroom at the time, we had an outhouse, believe it or not. And what we had was a shed kitchen. Some of you country folks will know exactly what we had a shed kitchen. And in the shed kitchen, you had a galvanized tub that you'd fill with water on Saturday night to take your Saturday night bath, and that kind of thing. But we didn't have an indoor bathroom. And my foster parents I'd do something I had no business doing and come in late and, I maybe come in, I had a bunch of change in my pocket that my friends and I had stolen. I'm just being real with you all. And they would be, you go in that shed kitchen. I'm going to be out there in a minute. I'd go out the back door and run and never look back. In fact, there were times I'd run far enough where they could see me. And they couldn't catch me. And then I'd finally negotiate my way back, and they would say, just come on home. And I say, I'm gonna come home, but you got to promise I'm not gonna get a beating. And so finally my foster mother said, okay, you just come home and we'll forget all about it. I mean, those are the games I played. I tell you what, my father said to me, and if you run, it's gonna be worse because I can outrun you, I'll catch you, and it'll be worse when I catch you. I never ran from my father, even when I knew I messed up. And there were a couple times I messed up, but I didn't run from it. So, folks, I said all that simply I know it's anecdotal, but to say this, and of course, my mother still wasn't there, but at least I had a father in the home. This is critical. This is critical to the rearing of children, and particularly boys, but it's true for both girls and boys. But it's particularly true for boys because boys need that male authority in their lives. Here's some data. Fatherless homes produce 90% of all runaway children, 85% of all children with behavioral disorders, 71% of all high school dropouts, 75% of adolescent drug addicts, 70% of juveniles in youth correctional facilities. These are all children who have no father in the home. 85% of all youth offenders who go from youth or juvenile jail to adult prison. In other words, they graduate in their crimes and their criminal behavior to end up in adult prison. 85% of them are from single parent, female-headed households. 63% of youth suicides, children without fathers. 80% of convicted rapists grew up without a father in the home. 72% of adolescent murderers, kids who commit murder before the age of 18, no father in the home. One study found that 75% of adolescent patients in substance abuse centers are from fatherless homes. Children from fatherless homes are 5 times more likely to commit suicide, 10 times more likely to abuse drugs, 20 times more likely to suffer mental illness, 20 times more likely to do hard prison time, and 14 times more likely to commit murder than a child who has a father in the home. Another study found of 56 school shootings, 82% of the people who committed school shootings came from homes without a father. So look, the American family is in trouble. And we are all paying the price for it. We're paying the price for it in crime. We're paying the price for it in poor education. I mean, look, there's no question that the schools bear a lot of responsibility for the fact that America is 29 and 30 in reading and writing and down there toward the bottom of the barrel of industrial nations, even in math and science. I mean, how can the richest nation on earth be last in education? So the schools bear some responsibility for this, but look, parents do too. Because if you have a parent who is not engaged in that child's education, then the schools are better capable shall we say, more inclined and less accountable for spending their time teaching Jane that she's really John and John that he's really Jane than they do teaching children how to read and write. I mean, schools are not even teaching cursive anymore. I mean, what? I mean, every single one of us in my generation can write cursive because we were taught it. You got children growing up now, they don't even know what cursive writing looks. They can't read it because they've never seen it. They've not been taught it. But I'll tell you what, they sure do know what it means to be a girl born in a boy's body, whatever that means. I mean, that's insane. The family is the key. By the way, you know this, don't you? When homeschooling started, because parents were frustrated with what the public schools were doing to their children, when homeschooling started, one of the arguments against it was these children will never be socialized. They will never learn. Parents aren't equipped to teach their children. Guess who scores highest on standardized tests today? Yeah, homeschool children. Homeschool children. Folks, over the years, I've hired many people to work for me. And I'll tell you something. I have found that the young people I have hired who were homeschooled tended to be far and above the most mature, the most reliable, the most committed to excellence of all the people I've hired. Because parents are really the ultimate educators of their children. And of course, parents get help. You don't do this all by themselves. They need some outside help. And sometimes they join consortiums of other parents who are doing the same thing, or they take advantage of the sports in the public school system, as they've been doing in Maine. And just that's another matter. Had a team kicked out because a team of girls kicked out of that's Vermont, actually. Team of girls kicked out of Vermont athletic events because they wouldn't play with a guy who, of course, thinks he's a woman. They said, we're not playing with him. That's a man. Oh, well, then you're not playing because you failed to recognize him as a woman. Well, because he's not a woman. He's not a girl. But that's what schools are now committed to doing. I mean, that's very, very important, you see, for the education of a child. They got to know that guys can become girls and girls can become guys, right? I mean, that's part of the normal flow of life these days. Yeah. Not the normal flow of any life of people who want sanity to govern their lives and don't want their children, particularly their girls, being forced to shower with guys in their locker rooms who the only thing that makes him a woman in the mind of these school officials is the fact that he says so. That means everything else is the same, but he says he's a woman, and that's all we need to know. I mean, folks, as Andrew said, how dumb can you be and still breathe? Well, look, the family has broken down. I've been spending a lot of time on talking about that, pointing out the problem, and I haven't yet gotten into the solutions that I do want to get into that. But let me share a couple of other statistics with you to show you how bad this is. The percentage of married couples with children has dropped from 71% in 1970 to 47% in 2022. This is the last date we had the statistics. You realize what a significant drop that is? That means people are not even having children now. A growing proportion of children live with only one parent, with statistics showing 54% of American children now across the board live in a single-parent, female-headed household. 54% of all the children in America. Over half of all American households are now childless, with both married couples without children and single individuals without children contributing to this number. People are not, they don't want a family as we once understood it. Now, folks, you may think, well, what's that have to do with the breakdown of the family? Folks, that has to do with the breakdown of the culture. Because what it means is people no longer see value in having, loving, raising children. Fewer people see value in it. Children with parents who have higher levels of education are more likely to live in a two-parent household with both parents in their first marriage. Now, I don't know what education has to do with this, because it really should have nothing to do with education, but maybe it's just the pragmatics of it. I was discussing this with someone not too long ago. To this day and time, it is very difficult for one person, unless that person has got really a plum job. It's very difficult for one person to raise a family on a single salary. I mean, it's very difficult. Usually nowadays, you need two parents working. Now, by the way, I don't like that scenario has unfolded, but that's the way it is. And maybe that's why, because as a matter of economic necessity, being married is, and by the way, fewer married people live in poverty than unmarried people. Aware of that? That's the data. In fact, if you stay out of trouble, if you finish high school, if you wait until you're married to have children, there's almost zero likelihood that you'll live in poverty. But of course, that's not the route many people are choosing today. Look at this, the percentage of non-family households has risen substantially, meaning that many people are just choosing to stay to themselves. See, I think the family is the most important socializing institution in the world. And when a society starts to lose that socializing institution, guess what? Other things replace it. And that's what we saw in all the data I shared with you about prison and drugs and mental illness. And look at this one, folks. The nation's fertility rate has declined since 1957. There were 122.9 births per thousand women ages 15 to 44 in 1957. In 2023, the current fertility rate is less than half what it was in 1957. It has dropped to 54.5 births per thousand women. Folks, we are not replacing our population in America anymore. You realize that? That's a 56% decline. That's more than half. Family's in trouble in America. The family is in crisis. And so we've created something, we meaning staying true to America's national destiny, has created something called the Family Restoration Institute. The Family Restoration Institute. And that institute is committed to restoring the principles that are causing this tremendous breakdown that I've just shared with you. And of course, I can give you some of those principles in the time we have remaining, but what do you think the first one is? Take a wild guess. Bringing God back to the center of family life. Bringing God back to the center. Here's a revolutionary idea. Don't have sex until you're married. That's not a Bishop Jackson idea. That's a God idea. How many families do you think are teaching their sons and daughters that today? You know, we have normalized sin. You know, some dumb television show comes on and some girl decides she's going to move in with her boyfriend. And the father says, so you all decided to live in sin. And the girl excoriates her father. Don't you dare speak to me that way. What do you mean? And the father, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. And the father's apologizing. It is living in sin. But guess what? Not only is it living in sin, it's setting children up for a very unhappy life. Because there's no covenant commitment to that relationship. children born of that relationship often never have that man and that woman. By the way, 85% of people who live together without the benefit of marriage never get married. People say, well, we're testing it out. No, you're not. You're not testing it out. You're not getting ready for marriage. You're getting ready to not be married. And guess what happens to children often born in those situations? They end up living with their mother alone, with the guy who fathered those children off doing something else. Maybe later on he gets married. Now he's got to deal with trying to pay child support, which often she's got to chase him for. I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess. But how many people want to say, you know what? God says sex is for marriage and for marriage only, which, by the way, as a footnote, means there's no such thing as a marriage between two men and two women. Because I don't care what the Supreme Court says, God says marriage is only for one man and one woman in the bonds of holy matrimony, period, exclamation point, end of discussion. There's nothing more to be said about that. I don't care what the culture says. I don't care what the society says. Homosexuality is sin, and you only compound that sin when you try to legitimize it by bringing two homosexuals together and saying, oh, now we're married. So that's just a footnote. But marriage is for one man and one woman committed together for life to raise those children in a happy, healthy, two-parent monogamous family. And folks, part of the reason why divorce is so rampant and marriages are so unstable is because God is not in the middle of those situations. When you put God first, he teaches you how to be a husband. He teaches you how to be a wife. He teaches you how to be a father. He teaches you how to be a mother. I got married to my wife before I was saved, but I tell you what, when I got saved, she got a brand new husband. And my children got a brand new father. And a whole lot better one. And one that got better. The longer I was walking in Christ, the better I got. And I'm still getting better. I wish I had more time to talk to you about all of the things that we are trying to do to help rebuild the family. But folks, that's going to do it for today. I've enjoyed being with you. Thank you all for taking time to listen to me about this very important issue that very few people are addressing because it is such a difficult one to address. This is Truth and Liberty. I've been your guest host today, in for Richard Harris. God bless each and every one of you, and I'll see you again sometime soon.